Let's pray as we sit. Lord Jesus, as we spend time now reflecting on your word, would you open our hearts and minds to what you have to say to us in St. George's today? Amen. So this is going to be the most important sermon I've preached all year so far. Yeah, it's also the first one, so it would be. Kicking off our series on vision and values, thank you to Kathy, who spoke last week on prayer in my absence. It's the first Sunday last week when I wasn't able to be here because I was sick in 3 years. So I've been here for 3 years now, can you believe? And we're on a journey together, aren't we? Thanks, Melody. We're on a journey together, aren't we? Thank you, fantastic. Okay, let's get some energy in the room. We're on a journey together as a church because we're not here by coincidence. We're not just here by coincidence. We're here because God has called us to be here. And so, I don't know whether you so far have made New Year's resolutions and broken and failed and given up on them. Anyone? The trick is just don't make them in the first place. I find that's easier. That's my approach. I don't make them, and then I can't break them. But it's good, isn't it, at the start of the year to think about focusing on the year ahead and spending a bit of time just kind of asking those important questions. And it's good for us to do that as a church because by the grace of the Anglican Church, we have our vestry meeting coming up on February the 24th, which is at the end of February. And so it's a time when we're kind of forced to reflect on the year that's gone and look towards the year that's ahead. And so in the run-up to that time, we're going to spend a few weeks doing some navel gazing. We're going to really look at, who are we as a church? What are we about? Why are we here? So this is quite an inward few weeks in some ways. But it is, if it is inward, it's inward so that we can focus outward. So the title of the series is called Vision and Values. And you'll remember nearly 3 years ago when Parish Council spent a morning working on, what's God calling us to do in this place? What's the vision for St. George's? And we spent some time doing that because we were told we had to by the bishop. And then the agreement was, the parish and the rector must come up with something for the first year. And we said, well, if we think these are good for a year, then it's not really long enough to see them come into fruition. So what would that look like until 2020? And so we came up with our 2020 vision. Which was a 4-year plan. And so we're halfway through now the 4 years. We're halfway through the 2020 vision. And there are some things that we can say we're doing great at, and there are other things where there's room to grow. And so the real sense was that we should spend some time focusing on, well, what is it that defines St. George's? What makes us tick? What's our DNA, if you like to use that language? And the word around that is the word culture. The word culture. What does it feel like to be a member of St. George's? What does it feel like when you walk into the building? What does it feel like? It feels warm today because the heating's on. But that's not the culture, is it? There's any of you who've ever read any books on business and management will know of a guy called Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker has this wonderful phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Say it with me. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know what you had for breakfast, but if you were culture, you'd have eaten strategy. So essentially, you can have all the wonderful strategies in the world, but if the culture of the place is wrong, then it's not going to happen. Let me give you an example, and this is going to be fun. I just say that because that way you might laugh when I get to the end. Because you never know, do you, with my humor? So this is intending to be fun. So just imagine as a church, if we said that we value welcome, that welcome is a really important value that we have. and we plaster it on the signs outside the church, a welcoming church. We put it on the sign on the street, a welcoming church. And then someone comes in, and they find that every single one of our doors is locked on Sunday morning. Well, because they're all broken. And if you want to get in the church, you actually have to come around the fire exit there. And to get to that fire exit, you can't actually get there if you've got a pushchair or a wheelchair. And then you come into the church, supposing you make it through the obstacle course of the grass that's quite soggy, and you get through the fire exit into the church, and then nobody hands you a leaflet and tells you what's going on. Nobody says hello to you. Nobody says it's great to see you. And then at the end of the service, everyone disappears off in a particular direction, and you don't know what they're doing. And you've discovered that actually they were going for lunch. And the keg had decided to provide a 3-course lunch in the hall. And you didn't get told this. And so all the parishioners run off into the hall to go and have their steak, or vegetarian equivalent of steak, tofu. And you're going, well, I don't feel very welcome. Now, that's a bit of a caricature. And we could all think of examples of churches we've been to that weren't very welcoming. But the point is, if we say we're welcoming, but the culture of the place is not actually putting that welcome into practice, then culture has eaten strategy for breakfast. Organizations face this all the time. So culture is really, how does it feel? What does it feel like to be in a place? What does it feel like to be at St. George's? Culture is why when you walk into McDonald's, you get a different feeling to when you walk into the keg. It's why when you walk into Starbucks, you get a different feeling to the feeling you get when you walk into Tim Hortons. So we have culture. But how do we create culture? How do we name it and say, this is what it feels like? I contacted a friend who works a lot with values and culture and with organizations and this kind of organizational development stuff. And I said, what's the difference between culture and values? And he texted me back and he said, I'm having a curry right now. I need to send you an email. It will be a longer answer than a text message. So he wrote back the next day and he essentially said, it's like this. The culture you're trying to create is like a cake. A few bakers here like to bake cakes? Great, I've just signed you up for the breastfeeding drop-in. We need some more bakers. So the culture is like the cake, and the values that create the cake are the ingredients. So we have to put in place the ingredients into a recipe, and out pops the cake. And so it's true in an organization and in a church. If we want to create a particular culture, then we need to know what the values are, what the ingredients are that go into that culture. And so what's happened I'll get to the slides in a second. What's happened in the last few months is, we've had Christmas. Do you know 1,000 people attended worship at St. George's in December? Praise the Lord, 1,000, if you add the attendance of all our different things up, 1,000 people attended a worship service of some kind in December, which is fantastic. So December was quite a busy time, but in the midst of all that, God really kind of impressed on me this thing about what are our values? Because my oversight has been, in the last 2 years, that I've never got us to write them down. And so we've come to various sticking points. Sticking points around decision-making, sticking points when you're having coffee and talking, of things that aren't quite fitting together like a nice jigsaw. Where people are saying, well, why are we doing this? And I don't understand. And asking those kinds of questions. And we've all been in those conversations. And it's because, I think, that we didn't articulate, here are the particular things that we value. We've said where we want to be. We want to fill the church. We want to be outward in our community. We've said where we want to go, but we haven't kind of talked about how we're going to do it, what it's going to feel like. And so we get people saying, well, why are we spending all this money on coffee? It's ridiculous. You know? Well, we're spending money on coffee because we value welcome and care. And because we value welcome and care, we want to have the best coffee we can have so that people feel that it's a place they want to stay. Because if they stay because the coffee's good, then they'll get to know people and they'll get stuck into the community. So our value is community. And because we value community, we're going to spend money on the stuff that helps community happen. But we haven't articulated that. So really, in the last couple of months, I've been talking to lots of people and trying to ask, what are we doing? Not to create something new, but to ask, what are we doing? What are the values that over the last 2 or 3 years we've been trying to live out at St. George's? And can we put names around what we're doing? And so we came up with 4 things. There were more than 4 things. If you're a mathematics teacher and you want to see my workings out, I've got flip charts on the wall in my office. So what you have now is about iteration 7. And this isn't set in stone. I'm sure that there'll be an 8 and a 9 and a 10. But we've kind of gone, what is it? And how can we communicate this clearly? So here they are, and they'll come up on the screen. The first one of our values is growing community of welcome and care. So we tried to get things into one word, and it didn't quite work. So they're word pairs. So growing community. Community, and this is what I'm going to major on today, so I'll come back to this one. Growing community of welcome and care. So we can skip to the next. Encouraging disciples. Encouraging disciples. In gratitude, in faith, and to take risks. So to be a church where we have a culture of encouragement. Now, in some ways, for each of these cultural values that will help create our culture, there's an antidote or an antithesis of it. And this one is moaning and grumbling and whinging. Have you ever come across someone in the church who's moaned and grumbled and whinged? And so how do you turn around a culture, which Anglicans do really well at? Other denominations do too, but as Anglicans, we're kind of really good at this, whinging and moaning. How do we turn that round? We do it by encouraging. We do it by encouraging. We encourage. We encourage each other. Encourage each other in our discipleship. Encourage each other to take risks. So third one, taking ownership. A few weeks ago, I came to the church on a Monday, and somebody had left a poo outside the front door. Just in case you didn't hear that right, I came to the church, and somebody had left a human poo outside the front door. And I decided I would just do an experiment and see how long it stayed before someone moved it. And do you know what the answer was? It's still there. Not really. A week. It took a week. Because it wasn't anyone's job to remove the poo from next to the front door of the church. So, there's been, I can give you other examples of things that have been left. And we all have done it. When someone's left something somewhere, and so we just walk by it. And we keep on walking by it because we don't know why it's there. And we know it might be an odd thing to find in a place. Like if someone left a bag or a box just outside in the welcome space. It used to happen a lot. Someone would leave something there, and we'd walk by it for days, if not weeks. And in the end, we'd discover actually it shouldn't be there at all. And someone just forgot it. So the opposite of that is taking ownership. It's all of us playing our part in the body of Christ, in the whole church. And the fourth one is consistent excellence in all we do, taking care of the details for the glory of God. This is one which has perhaps had is the most controversial. Because so often in churches we say, oh, well, it's fine. We're not going to get it right every time. We shouldn't try and be perfect. And actually what we've been trying to work at as a church is this value of excellence and doing it consistently. It's why we've spent time in the last few years with, we had a season where there were a few people who came to this particular service who sat down for an hour and a half on a Monday or Tuesday and went through the detail of what happened in the service and what can we do to make it a bit better. Why? For the glory of God. Why? Because it fits into everything else. So these are the four values that I'll be speaking about over the next few weeks. So I'm going to go back to the first one, which is really the focus today, which is about community. You know, a lot of people, when they come to St. George's and they're quite new, they say they appreciate the feeling of community. Just raise a hand if you felt that when you first came here. Or they say they felt welcomed, or they felt cared for. So growing community, growing because we're outward, because we want to be bigger. We want to have more people touched by the love of God in Jesus Christ. So we're a growing community. Because we value community, it shapes our behaviors. Because we value community, we have a welcome team. We stick a sign out the front that says welcome. That helps show people where the door is, because otherwise, if they're new, they might not know. We have a welcome team who will go out and open the door and welcome people in. In a world of loneliness, we value community. So, I'm going to talk for a moment about welcome. What does it feel like when you come to a church for the first time? Shout out, what do you feel like if you go to a church for the first time? Awkward? Strange? Shy? Scary? "16 years ago, Bridget and I were on holiday. I know I don't look that old, but 16 years ago, Bridget and I were on holiday in Madrid, and we decided to go to church on a Sunday. And I'd gone into an internet cafe. Do you remember those, anyone? Internet cafes. And I went to an internet cafe, and I'd found a church that was an English-speaking church. I think it was an American church. And so we went into this church. They had a band, and it seemed it was all okay, and we were there, and it wasn't massive. It was it met in the bottom of a hotel. There was, 50, 60 people there. And we'd sung some songs, and that was all fine. And then at some point, the pastor at the front stood up and said, "We'd like to welcome anyone who's new." Clearly, they had a value of welcome. And so we'd like to welcome anyone who's new. So they said, "If you're new, would you stand up?" Now, I'm quite British, as you may have noticed. And so I found a very strong glue and remained sitting on my seat. Meanwhile, Bridget's nudging me, and I'm like, "I am not standing up." And so I sat there, and so then the people next to us decided that they were going to help us feel welcome because we couldn't stand up on our own. I didn't think you were standing up at that point. No, we had... Well, I'll tell you my version of the story. And Bridget will tell you hers. So my version of the story goes like this, that we were sitting down and the people next to us, they stood up and they said, "These people are new! There are some new people here! And they're not standing up." And I was like, "I am not standing up. I don't stand up. It's not what I do." And so in the end, we had to stand up, by which time I'm bright red, because that's what I do when people look at me. So there I am, bright, and at the front they're saying, "It's great to welcome you." "Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. They clearly valued welcome. And they'd welcomed us in the way that they thought they wanted to welcome people. And at the end of the service, the prayer was said, and as fast as we could, we ran out of the hotel, to the point that someone almost ran after us. Like, "Where are you going? Will you come for coffee?" "No, we have somewhere to go." And we went and we found a metro station. We went underground on the train and got out of there. We didn't know where we were going. We were just like, "We need to get out of here now." So they had a value of welcome. But it was the kind of welcome that is great to tell in a story, but I'm not going back there. And I don't know, have you been to a church like that? And the alternative kind of church, of which I've been to a lot of, is the kind of church where there's, especially in England, these big old churches, big oak doors, with hinges that have never seen any oil. And so you kind of, you couldn't go to an internet cafe and find out what time the service is. You have to go and read the notice board, which is printed in gold leaf lettering, and you find out that, okay, here's when the service is, we'll go to church. And so get to the place, and the door's shut. Well, it's cold outside, and the heating is very expensive. And so they don't want any of the draft coming in. And so they have these doors that are shut with these kind of massive cast iron handles that you turn. So you turn the handle and open the door. And invariably, because I like to maximize my time, I'm normally slightly late for things. So it's 2 minutes after the service is started, and everyone looks round because they've already sung the first hymn, and now they're doing some kind of confession or something holy. And then you go to sit down somewhere, and you go and sit down, and of course discover that the person who's been doing something is not there, and they come back and, excuse me, you're in my seat, sort of thing. Has that ever happened to you? I'm sure it's happened to more of you than that. There are churches that are just so not welcoming at all. So somehow we need a balance between the place where you just want to hide in your seat because you don't want to be welcome because they're over the top, and the place where they say, will you go away? We value community, and so we want to get that right. We value community, and so we want to get that right. We want to get the right balance so that we can welcome people in the right way, because we value community. And it is not something for the welcome team to do on their own. It is something for all of us to do. Welcome teams are wonderful, but they also can become a problem. At the 9 o'clock service, we don't have a welcome team. What that means is everyone in the congregation is forced to welcome new people. And they do it. When someone walks in, because there is no one whose job it is to hand them a service, they'll recognize someone who's new and they'll hand them a service and just kind of talk to them. So I'm not saying let's disband the welcome team. I'd like to increase the welcome team and have people in the car park, because they say you need to welcome people 3 times to feel really welcome. The first time is at the car, the second time is at the door, and the third time is when they actually come in, if they're new, so they can find their seats. So I would say let's have more people on the welcome team. But also to note that all of us, it's all of our job to be welcoming. And welcoming takes noticing. Because if you notice, the problem was, it wasn't that I was sitting in my seat in that church in Madrid because I didn't want to be welcomed. It was that I didn't want to be shoved to the front of the church. I didn't want to be made a fool of on my first visit. So welcoming, because we love and care for people, which goes back to both of our Bible readings, because we love and care for people, welcoming is about noticing how somebody would like to be welcomed. Does that make sense? How would they like to be welcomed? Because some people, they want the big handshake and the big welcome, and it's great to see you, and others, they just want to come in quietly and go away quietly. And we have to hold both. Because we value community, we welcome in different ways. And the second part of valuing community is caring. So the first John reading, really, it's, you'll know they're my disciples by the love they have for each other. The church is a place where we need to care for each other. The value of community that we extend in our church spills out into the whole of our lives. So life groups are the primary way that we offer care for each other at St. George's. Life groups are the primary way. There are other groups that meet together, other things that go on, such as the ACW, which meets tomorrow, such as people that get together and do ministries, like at the community supper on Saturdays. There are other groups too where some care is provided. But if you want to be cared for in the church, don't wait for me to do it, because I will let you down. I'm going to say that again. If you want to be cared for in the church, don't wait for me to do it, because I will let you down. And that's a guarantee. There are 900 people on our parish list now who are connected with St. George's in some way. And that is a lot of people. So we have to care for each other. Now, the other part of that is to say, if you want to hear from me, then my card's on the table and you can get hold of me. But we have to take ownership of our Christian lives to be able to say, how are we caring for each other and what kind of care do we want to receive for ourselves? So if you want to be connected in the church, join a life group. And if there isn't a life group that's working, we'll find a new way of starting a new one that might work. We're now up to 7 groups and 57 people are in them. The wonderful thing that happens in life groups, I know all of the groups will have different stories. The wonderful thing that happens is that when someone's ill or going through something, the group is there to support them. The group is there to care for them. And so it's not an institutionalized model of care, such as the Anglican Church might have been used to, whereby we know somebody's sick, so we're going to send the priest round. It's where people who have built up relationships over time can care for each other. Because that's what the Bible talks about caring for each other. The Vancouver Foundation has done some research and said that the biggest issue facing Metro Vancouver right now is loneliness. The biggest issue facing Metro Vancouver is loneliness. And so for us to value community is about creating a place where people won't be lonely, where we are connected with each other, because we need to be connected with each other. And when we learn to do welcome and care because we value community in our church, it spills out into the whole of our life. Because when we start to look out for each other here, we start to look out for people elsewhere. Do you want a railway story? Was that a yes? So we're in England just after Christmas, and I was standing on a railway station platform, on stairs, and waiting for the boys who were doing something. And I was standing near to a door, and my eyes are always outward. And so I caught the eye of somebody who came down and said, can you help me carry my stroller down the stairs? And so I did. I helped her carry the stroller down the stairs. And then I said, we're going to platform 4, which is where the London train was going from. We're going to platform 4 as well. I'll help you up the stairs at that end too. And I think at that point she realized that I wasn't a member of railway staff. I just had that look about me. A number of years since I worked in a station. But it's that thing of, because I'm looking all the time, how can I help? What can I do? That's what I'm doing all the time. And that's what we learn in church. We learn how to care for people in church, so that when we're out in the workplace, on our commute, at school, in the community, in our houses, so we can care for people in the world. So, practically, there are lots of ways that we do welcome and we do care. And one of the things that the parish council asked me to emphasize is that getting connected by being in a ministry that serves others is a really good way of doing this. So if you are not yet serving in a ministry, then talk to me, talk to Melody, talk to Kathy or Graham, the wardens, talk to one of the welcome team who wear the lanyard with their name on. Talk to somebody and say, is there a way I can get connected? Or if you're shy, fill in a yellow card. I won't make you stand up in the pew. Fill in a yellow card and just say on it how that you'd like to get connected by serving. As we grow as a church, it's really important that we're on the same page, that we know what our values are. Our values are based on our beliefs, and our values turn into our behaviors. And so by having some shared values that are written down, they're on your bulletin, you can cut them out and stick them somewhere, use it as a bookmark, and they'll be there for the next few weeks. And then when you see these things happening, can I encourage you to notice them? It's begun already within the office and some of the people who are around during the week that we've been noticing when someone's been living out one of our values. So can I encourage you to notice and say to people, I see you did a great job there of welcoming. And we'll get to those as we go on. So I want to finish now by asking you for 2 minutes to talk to somebody near you, or have a think on your own if you'd rather not, about what is it that we're doing really well around welcome and care, and what is it that we could spend some more time and investment to do better. So one thing we're doing really well around welcome and care, and one thing that we can invest in. So find somebody near you. You might need to move to do that, and spend 2 minutes talking about what we're doing well and what we could do better around welcome and care.